and welcome to this rainy Wednesday night edition of the Moriah Nightly News. Rainy and muggy, but in any case, here we are. And so, from the nation to Moriah, here are tonight's top stories. After the Israeli strikes over the weekend, the Iranians hit a U.S. Apache helicopter. This was after our broadcast on Monday. And as a result, the president struck back and noted that we had the authority to do that and is considering taking further action. And at this point, it appears that that ceasefire may be over with and the air campaign may be starting back up. It is not fully clear at this point whether that is going to be the case. With U.S. Central Command, the military section that is over the Middle East, and the Pentagon framing these as defensive and in self-defense, not wanting to fully tear up the ceasefire. But certainly the president's language appears to be in that direction. It may end up working in his favor with the midterms being on the horizon. It may be in his favor to draw this to a close by force rather than letting it drag out. Some are suggesting that these are essentially forced diplomacy, an attempt to bring Iran to the negotiating table. However, at this point, I do believe that they are not negotiable, essentially. The oil industry, as the media seems to be pressing the president over gas prices here at home, and certainly a concern for voters. Long term, the strategy has shifted for American oil and others, with even Middle Eastern countries like Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE looking to build pipelines and other projects to reroute oil around the Strait of Hormuz so that Iran will not have all of that bottled up in the future and essentially take that leverage away from the Iranians. It was interesting to note that for all of the talk about the economy and inflation, that over the weekend, the jobs numbers was published. The jobs numbers for May were published in the Wall Street Journal, and front page news, I might add, that it was far stronger than what they had told or anticipated themselves, adding about 172,000 jobs and posting strong payroll gains. Noteworthy with the concerns over inflation. And of course, that uncertainty with the war and inflation is really why they were probably projecting lower than what they had anticipated. And those numbers will matter for the Federal Reserve and change the picture in terms of what to do in terms of interest rates. That's usually a tool, but that the federal government uses to keep inflation from getting too far out of control. That's usually a nonpartisan tool. Both administrations have used that in the past to either spur economic growth or keep it under control, or vice versa. And that same article also noted that even with the current economic uncertainty and the situation there, that U.S. companies are still generating a significant amount of profit. That likely is why hiring is still on the rise, and hiring is still projected to be in what they call the springtime, and as opposed to a winter season, basically. So looking good there and with profits high. So it appears that for all of the fear mongering that the media tends to lean towards, that there are more of a different signal from what the data would suggest. Not that those concerns are not valid, but that perhaps they are overstated in other ways as well. On the midterm front, on the national scene, Graham Plattner, the controversial Democrat that we reported on Monday, did end up winning his primary in Maine. So I would say no more taking the high road for Democrats on the moral road, but I'm sure that will not stop them regardless. But he did win his primary over Maine's former governor there. She had dropped out of the race, from what the media reported, but was apparently still on the ballot. And even with all of the scandals, he still managed to win. On that note of issues here in New York State, which this came out last week, and you cannot make this up, New York State passed a law. This is your government at work here, your democratic government, democratically controlled, I might add, changing the designation for parents to gestating and non-gestating parents. I guess in an attempt to be more inclusive, and that is actual news. I am not making that up, and I don't think I have to say much more about that, other than to say that is the most nonsensical and outright stupid thing I have ever heard in my 30 years of life. So, with that, we move into the top story for us here on the Moriah Nightly News, and that was the election here in our district. Which actually, before that election, however, because we have two elections that are important for us here in our listening area, is the governor's election. Because if you don't like what I just told you about the gestating and non-gestating nonsense that I just read to you, then you might be intrigued to know that Kathy Hochul, Her Majesty Queen Kathy, is up for re-election this November. She is running against Bruce Blakeman. He appears to be the front runner at this point, though the primaries have not yet passed. After Elise Stefanik dropped out of the race in late 2025, which was not clear why that was that she dropped out, citing family reasons, but I was not convinced of that, to be quite honest with you. Surprisingly, this was a couple of months ago, but Spectrum News reported that Hochul's lead over Blakeman was shrinking. And in 2 months, and this was according to my alma mater of Siena, the newly renamed Siena University down in Albany, Siena College, for those of you who would know it better is by its old name. Her lead had, between February and April of this year, over Blakeman, dropped 20 points. And at that time, at the beginning of April, she was up 47% to 34% overall in that poll there. But it is believed by Blakeman that the energy crisis in New York is the cause. Which maybe even in New York City, there's more common sense than you might think, or than we might realize up here. And that is where I lead to tonight's main story, which is the NY21 race, because most of you remember or recall that on Monday, I had discussed the debate that took place about 2 weeks ago now through that affiliate down in Albany, that news station in Albany. I wouldn't say it's not CBS 6, but I don't have that. But The newspaper that we all know, the out of Plattsburgh, did not cover a significant chunk of what took place in that debate. And they, it was not that the reporting was false, it just missed basically what were the key policy issues discussed by both the candidates. So I went back and found the footage that was on that station's YouTube channel, and it was a very noteworthy debate. And so actually I would not fault the moderator at all, but the press Republican here for missing what was the main policy concern and where the two candidates disagreed, because the two candidates by and large agreed on everything, which is typical for an in-party debate, as both of them cited that pretty much they agreed on all of the issues like Iran, Israel, gas prices, things like that. And where the two disagreed, however, was really when it came to the renewable energy debate, which has sparked controversy here in our area. That was because during the debate, Constantino called out Smolin for his involvement in the solar panel issue, citing that his property is used for a solar farm and that he had backed them in the Green New Deal, and said that and he called it, Constantino called it a taxpayer-funded solar farm on his own land, on Smolin's land. And Smolin, of course, dismissed it and called it false and defamatory and called them Korean panels and not Chinese panels because Constantino said they were right from China. And that statement was independently verified by an agency. I believe it was the Watertown Daily News. It was a news source out of Smolin does have this solar farm associated with property that he owns, so it is true. And so that was where the two candidates disagreed, was over the solar farm debate that is very much a key concern for voters in our issue. And I have no clue why the Press Republican did not include that in their reporting. Everything else, again, was correct. The tax fraud issue was brought up, and all of those questions, those rapid fire questions that they report on, I don't know, Trump being on the $250 bill was all in there, but pretty much a non-issue for those of us who live here. So that will be up for you, the voters, to decide on June 23rd when the primary comes to vote. That was the main focus there. And around the region, there it is. My notes are all over the place tonight. Around the region, on the note of renewable energy, is the slew of town hall meetings that are happening. These are, for the most part, regular town hall meetings, although there are a few best specific hearings mentioned or thrown in there. And one of them happened to our northwest this evening in Franklin, New York. That was my NBC5 reporting there. And admittedly, I kind of thought watching the report that the town supervisor seemed somewhat nonchalant about the issue. It was just my personal take on it. In any event, the APA itself, the Adirondack Park Agency that we all love so dearly here, is having a best discussion at 9:30 a.m. tomorrow for anybody that's interested. And This just seems so typical to put it on a workday morning when no one can get there, which, if you want to force an agenda through, that's the perfect way to do it. So they have that going on at 9:30 a.m. tomorrow morning. Tomorrow evening is the regular town hall meeting in Ticonderoga for those who are aware of that at 6 p.m. But Crown Point is also meeting at 5:30 for those who live in Crown Point. Disappointing, I did not realize that Willsboro and Westport were having meetings. Willsboro was tonight at 6:30 p.m. and then Westport was at 7 p.m. Monday, so this was the night before last, met at 6 p.m. in Schroon Lake, just to give an idea that the towns in our viewership or in our viewing area have been meeting yet for their regular town boards or on this issue specifically in the last few weeks. Again, some of these are regular town board meetings, but others are best specific. And even if they are town board meetings, you as a citizen, as a tax-paying citizen, can go there because they are open to the public and can address these issues specifically with your elected officials. Because remember, they work for you. And I did not see any on the docket there for Moriah as of yet, and that will be something that I will follow up on in the days ahead for those here in the town of Moriah. But it looks like they were not on the schedule as I saw. That was a Facebook post, but in any event, I'm sure that their board meeting is somewhat soon as well. So that's what's happening around the region for that issue to shed some light on it. And the Moriah channel will be down in Ticonderoga tomorrow to cover that meeting. And as you saw, we had footage last night on the zoning and planning board meeting that was held last week in Ticonderoga. And so you saw that I did not make up that story about the couple wanting to distribute bread for at a low cost to their neighbors and being harassed and interrogated by the planning board, but solar panels and things like that that nobody wants get pushed through easily. So with that, that is the Moriah Nightly News for this Wednesday evening, and we are almost through halfway through June, and still looking for those to fill out our business sponsorship or business spotlight segment here at the middle of the program. And you can find all the information for that here on Facebook or on YouTube. Be sure to like, subscribe, and your support, of course, is always, always appreciated, and the response that we have been getting there. And be sure to keep spreading the word about us, and we will be around this summer as well. So that is the Moriah Nightly News for this Wednesday, and good night.